Hello, so in this lesson we're going to be looking at the lungs and gaseous exchange, the exchange of gases using our respiratory system. So this is lesson 5, I believe, of your booklets on page 24. You've got your start task, which you should have done or do after watching this video. So we're going to look at the respiratory system. I've got here a drawing of a cross-section of a person and what we look like inside. We've got some key parts that we need to know. So we've got this first bit up here just behind our nose. This is our nasal cavity. When you breathe in through your nose, that's where the air is going into. We've also got one in our mouth as well, our oral cavity. Little bit easier to see. You open your mouth and you can see it again. If you breathe through your mouth, air goes into there. And these both connect up at the back of the throat, and they go down into this pipe here called your windpipe. To give it its proper name, it's trachea. Now, trachea I've drawn here. We've got some rings around it. These are rings of cartilage. Now, cartilage is the same stuff as what is in your nose, so it's not a bone, but it is a very, very hard substance. It's around here to give it support and stops it collapsing. So stops the trachea collapsing. So as we breathe in, air goes in through our nasal cavity or our oral cavity and goes down our trachea, where we then get down towards our lungs. It can now split. We have two ways it can go. It can go into our left lung or it can go into our right lung. Again, just like with the heart, we label them opposite way around to as we see them, so they are our own lungs. So this one is our left and this one is our right. And we've got these first tubes that it goes into. These are called bronchus. And we have a left one and a right one. After the bronchus, the air continues down. We'll just focus on the left lung for the moment. It's exactly the same on the right, but we'll just focus on the left. We go into something a little bit smaller called a bronchiole. Bronchioles are small tubes that come off the bronchus. So you have the bronchus, which go down into the bronchioles. All the way at the end, we have something called alveoli, or alveolus. And the alveoli are small little sacs, and that is where the gas exchange happens. If we were to zoom in on it, we would see coming down from a bronchiole we get this sac called the alveoli, and this is where gas exchange happens. Now, this is the main part of the structure of our lungs. We've also got some extra parts around that I've drawn on here that we need to know about. We've got this thing here. This is a sheet of muscle called the diaphragm. It's a muscle. It helps with breathing. It also stops anything here going up into our lungs. So we don't want our stomach, our intestines going up into this place up here. But its main function is to help with breathing. We've also got our ribs, so our rib cage going around our lungs. That is there to protect our ribs, protect our lungs and our heart. And between the ribs, draw it in blue. I'm not sure how clearly you can see that it is blue on there, but I am drawing them in blue. We have something called the intercostal muscles. And these help with breathing as well. So we've got how air goes into the lungs. It will go through the nasal and oral cavities, into the trachea, down into a bronchus, towards a bronchiole, and then into an alveoli where gas exchange can happen. And breathing is helped by the intercostal muscles and the diaphragm. So we're now going to look at how we actually get air in and out of our bodies. So when air goes in, we are breathing in. To do that, the body goes through a variety of steps. So first off, we have the diaphragm along here and our intercostal muscles on our ribs. So first off, diaphragm and intercostal muscles contract. So they contract, the diaphragm gets flatter, the intercostal muscles contract as well, and this increases the volume of the lung. We've increased the volume of the lung. This is our lung here, and this will be our trachea up here. So we've increased the volume of the lung. Because we've increased the volume, but we haven't changed what's in there yet, we now have a lower pressure. We've got a lower pressure inside the lungs. Now that's compared to outside, where we've got a low pressure. Outside in the atmosphere around us, we've got a higher pressure. Now we like to have things being equal, so the higher pressure air will end up going into the lungs. We'll get air rushing into the lungs to correct that pressure difference. So air enters the lungs to correct the pressure difference. And this is how we can breathe in. Now see, we can control our breathing. You can think, I'm going to take a deep breath, I'm going to take a shallow breath, I'm going to take fast breaths or slow breaths, I'm going to try and hold my breath. But we will do all this stuff even when we're asleep, when we're not thinking about it. It's how we can breathe while we're asleep. It's how babies can breathe as well. They are able to breathe because this process happens. They don't have to think about it, it just happens naturally. Now when we breathe out, the reverse happens. So first off, we have our diaphragm and intercostal muscles relax. So that pushes the diaphragm up and the rib cage goes in. So we decrease the volume. We now have a higher pressure in the lungs. Got a high pressure in the lungs now and a low pressure outside. Because we've got a high pressure inside and a low pressure outside, air will be forced out of the lungs, up through the trachea, out through the nasal and oral cavities and back into the atmosphere around us. So the air is forced out of the lungs. If you think if you have a balloon and you pop it and then try and squeeze it, the harder you squeeze it, the faster the air comes out. Especially if you're going to make a tiny hole in it, you can get the air to come out very, very quickly. If you squeeze it, you're increasing the pressure, you're making the air leave quicker. So we're now going to look at the actual gas exchange that happens at the alveoli. So we've got our bronchiole going down to our alveoli. We've got air is going in. The air is very, very rich in oxygen. So we get plenty of oxygen molecules all in here. There is obviously some nitrogen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen, helium, all in there as well, but only in very, very tiny amounts. Oxygen is about 21% of the air that we breathe. Now, inside our body, we've got our blood vessels. We're going to focus on the blood vessel where exchange happens, and this is the capillary. Now, things we know about the capillary, they've got a wall is only 1 cell thick. And this helps with diffusion. We've got our alveoli as well. We've got millions of them inside us. They are tiny. They've got a large surface area. They've got lots of capillaries around them. I've drawn one here, but each one will have lots and lots of capillaries. We've got a very, very good blood supply to our lungs. So they've got a good blood supply. And again, the wall here is only 1 cell thick. Now we have to get oxygen from the alveoli into our capillaries. All they've got to do is pass through 2 cells, effectively. It's a very, very short diffusion distance. So we have a short diffusion distance. And we have a good blood supply. Now you can see that I've drawn my capillary in 2 different colours. I've drawn one blue and one red. So my blood is going this way. Now in my blue part of the capillary, it is deoxygenated blood, so there is a lot of carbon dioxide in the blood. We've got lots of carbon dioxide. Now because I've got lots of carbon dioxide here and not very much here, I have a concentration gradient. I've got a lot of it in my capillary and almost none of it in my alveoli. Now this means that the carbon dioxide will diffuse across. It's going to diffuse across this way to correct the concentration gradient. So it will diffuse across. Over this side here, I'm going to be oxygenating my blood. So I've not got any oxygen into my blood yet, but I have lots of oxygen molecules in my alveoli and not very many, or none at all at the moment, in my blood. I've got a concentration gradient, I've got a high concentration here and a low concentration here. So I'm going to see my oxygen molecules move across into the blood via diffusion. Again, very short concentration gradient, a very short distance to diffuse across, and a very great concentration gradient. Because I've got a good blood supply, any oxygen that moves in here is going to be taken away straight away. It's not going to stay here and linger around, it's going to move straight away. So I'm constantly making sure I've got a very low concentration of oxygen in my blood around the lungs. As soon as I get blood in there, it moves away. So this is our process of breathing. So we've looked at the structures of our lungs. We've looked at how air moves into the lungs, so the route it takes, going through our nasal cavity, to our trachea, to our bronchus, to our bronchioles, to our alveoli, where it will then diffuse across into the blood. Carbon dioxide coming out will diffuse from the blood into the alveoli. It will go up a bronchiole, into a bronchus, up the trachea, into the nasal and oral cavities, and then it will be breathed out into the atmosphere. We've also looked at how breathing happens, the mechanics behind it. So breathing in, our diaphragm and intercostal muscles contract. This increases the volume of the lung. Because we've increased the volume of the lung, we now have a lower pressure. We've got a high pressure outside and a low pressure inside, so air will be forced into the lungs to help correct that pressure difference. When we want to breathe out, or when we need to breathe out, our diaphragm and intercostal muscles will relax. This causes the diaphragm to go up, the muscles to go in, and we decrease the volume in the lungs. We've now got a higher pressure in the lungs and a lower pressure out of the lungs. This means that the air is forced out of the lungs back into the atmosphere. Now, this is an unconscious action. You do it while you're asleep. You don't have to think about it. Okay, please have a go at answering all of the questions in the booklet. If you need any help, please read the information that is in the booklet as well. Have a good rest of the lesson. Take care.